What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video, I'm going to be going through the top waiver wire targets heading into week 8 of the fantasy football season. Definitely some interesting options at every position, a couple of tight ends who could be playable, some running backs, some depth running backs for the future, and also some wide receivers that maybe are playable this week or, could break out throughout the rest of the season. If you guys enjoy the video, do me a huge favor, hit that like button, subscribe. Any questions, drop them down below. But let's just dive right into my first waiver wire target here, and it is going to be Hunter Henry. He is currently rostered in 27.4% of leagues, but he really should be like the priority tight end pickup this week. In his 2 games with Drake May, we have seen him go 3 for 41 and a touchdown, and then 8 for 92. So week 6, had those 5 targets, 3 for 41 and a touchdown. Then week 7, followed it up with 9 targets, and then that 8 for 92. He had an 83% route participation this past week. Very strong for the tight end position. And you look at this wide receiver room, Jalen Polk is not producing. Romeo Doubs, is kind of in and out of the lineup in week 7. But even when he is playing, they're still not using him like a full-time wide receiver. Like they're using him as the wide receiver 3, the slot option. So Hunter Henry looks like he could be the top target here for Drake May. Drake May has been pretty impressive through 2 weeks. Hunter Henry, in my opinion, is definitely a locked-in tight end 1 moving forward. Now, pivoting over to my next target, it is going to be Blake Corum, who's rostered in 17.2% of leagues. And Blake Corum really hasn't done a ton. It's not like he's going out producing every week as a running back 2. He's not getting as much usage as some of the other running back 2s out there, but he is the Kyren Williams handcuff. And in my opinion, that is the most valuable handcuff in the NFL. If Kyren Williams were to go down and miss any time, Blake Corum, in my opinion, is a locked-in top 10 running back. Kyren Williams, week after week, is handling a monster workload. He is just vacuuming up every single red zone opportunity. They are feeding him near the goal line, and he's not the biggest back. He's had some injury history, and so Blake Corum right now, operating as the clear-cut running back 2, if Kyren were to go down with injury, you need Blake Corum on your roster. Like, you could literally go from him giving you nothing on the back end of your bench to all of a sudden being like an absolute staple in your lineup just with 1 injury. That's the upside that Blake Corum has here. Now, looking at the first wide receiver, it is going to be Romeo Doubs, who's rostered in 37% of leagues. He went out in week 7, targeted 10 times, caught 8 of them for 94 yards. That was after he went out in week 6 and went 3 for 49 and 2 touchdowns. So 17 plus PPR points in back-to-back weeks. He continues to lead this wide receiver room in routes. He led all Packers wide receivers in targets here in week 7. And it's kind of interesting because he still had the same usage in terms of his routes early on in the season. Like, he was leading pretty much every single week, but the production really was not there. The volume was not there. And then he has this weird thing where he kind of gets suspended. He's away from the team. And that could have kind of buried him on the depth chart. That could have gave Christian Watson more opportunities. It could have gave, Dontayvion Wicks more opportunities. But instead of that, instead of him kind of getting thrown in the doghouse, all of a sudden he's had 2 of the best games of his career in back-to-back weeks. So I definitely feel like he's playable, wide receiver 3, flex territory. That's where like Romeo Doubs could kind of slide in week to week. And then also looking at Christian Watson, he kind of saw his routes take a hit. He barely saw a 50% route participation. So at this point, it is Romeo Doubs and Jaden Reed are the clear wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2 in snaps. So definitely someone who should be rostered in pretty much every single like normal-sized competitive league. Now looking at some running backs here, going to talk about Ray Davis, who's rostered in 14.7% of leagues. He is the James Cook handcuff here. In week 7, he had 5 carries for 41 yards and a touchdown. Also caught 1 pass for 6 yards. But I think, the bigger story here for Ray Davis is what we saw in week 6 when James Cook was out. He had 20 carries for 97 yards and a touchdown, 3 receptions for 55 yards. So Ray Davis probably not going to be super playable if James Cook is in the lineup, but we already have a, 1-game sample size of James Cook injured, out. What is that usage going to look like? And Ray Davis just straight up looks like a very good NFL running back. Day 3 rookie, but in his opportunity, he produced. If James Cook were to go down, Ray Davis is a must start in your lineup. Then we have Kimani Vidal, who's rostered in 7.6% of leagues. He plays tonight on Monday Night Football, so we haven't seen him play this week yet. But he's not a guy that I think is going to have a ton of upside week to week. He's the Chargers running back 2, but he is a very, very valuable handcuff back. We saw him get that, elevation onto the active game day roster after Gus Edwards went on IR. He went out in his rookie debut, caught a deep touchdown pass, didn't do a ton outside of it, but the opportunities just were not there. But when you look at a guy like J.K. Dobbins, who is getting force-fed by this Chargers offense, they clearly want to run the ball. And then you look at J.K. Dobbins' injury history, has really struggled to stay healthy, has suffered, at least a few very severe injuries at the running back position. It's very possible that at some point, Kimani Vidal is going to get his opportunity to start. And at this point, the waiver wire is probably pretty picked through. It's not like you're just finding these starting running backs sitting on the waiver wire. So it might seem gross to pick someone up who's not going to be relevant week to week, but that is how you turn that player into all of a sudden a starter, someone you trust in your lineup, because one injury, these handcuff running backs become very, very valuable. Another handcuff running back, Braelon Allen, rostered in 28.4% of leagues. Honestly, just a pretty rough game out of this Jets offense. I was expecting a little bit more in Davante Adams' debut there, but Braelon Allen, still the Breece Hall handcuff, hasn't had a ton of weekly upside over the past couple of weeks, but still worth being rostered as that handcuff play. Now, looking at a wide receiver here, want to talk about Ricky Pearsall, rostered in 5.5% of leagues. This was his first game back in the lineup after being shot, was targeted 5 times, caught 3 of them for 21 yards, and he ended up leading this team in routes. Now, pretty much all of that was due to the injuries to this 49ers wide receiver room. You had Debo, not like a long-term injury thing, but he was just sick, played a few snaps, was done for the day. You had Brandon Ayuk, who suffered some sort of ACL injury, could potentially keep him out for an extended period of time. And then you had Juwan Jennings, who was dealing with a hip injury. So Pearsall stepped in, led the team in routes, and even though, like I said, it was due to the injury, it's still a pretty decent sign that in his first game back, he was leading in routes over some of those other younger wide receivers they have on their roster. So Ricky Pearsall's, kind of barrier to producing in year one was always just the weapons on this team. You had Debo, Ayuk, Kittle, CMC. Is Ricky Pearsall going to be able to carve out a large enough role with those other weapons? But CMC's still out. George Kittle's balling, but those other wide receivers kind of in and out of the lineup. Who knows how long Ayuk is going to be out? There's a window here for Ricky Pearsall to produce, and so you have a first-round pick. Who knows? Maybe he balls out, finds a role in this offense. Worth picking up, at least in the short term, especially with these injuries to the 49ers weapons. Then back to some running backs here. Sean Tucker, rostered in 11% of leagues. He's going to play tonight, and he was definitely the big story from week 6. Went 14 for 136 and a touchdown, 3 receptions for 56 yards and a touchdown through the air. And he pretty much split the backfield 50-50 with Bucky Irving, with Rachaad White out in week 6. The problem here for Sean Tucker is that this Bucs coaching staff has come out. They've talked about a 3-headed committee, how they're going to give each of these guys a drive early on, and then kind of ride the hot hand from there on. This is not great at the running back position, because if your entire pretty much production is going to be based on one drive and then them wanting to ride the hot hand with you, it's going to be very tough to actually trust that player in your lineup week to week and expect any sort of consistency. I think the hope here for Sean Tucker is that he just plays well enough in these next few games that he can work his way into either the lead running back 1 role, or at least work his way into a 50-50 split like we saw earlier on. The hope for pretty much all these dudes is that someone gets phased out of this backfield. 3 running backs, way too many. You can deal with 2, you can deal with a 50-50 split, but if you have Bucky Irving, Rachaad White, and Sean Tucker all very involved, that's just not going to work for fantasy. And then I don't know if this is super fantasy relevant, but I do just hate the philosophy of giving each running back a drive and then that determining who's going to get the work rest of game for those players, because there's just so much variance. One drive is not a large enough sample size to determine how well a player is actually playing. One team goes 3 and out because the quarterback misses a couple throws, and then the other guy scores a touchdown on their drive but didn't do a ton. All of a sudden they're the hot hand. In my opinion, if you're the coaching staff, you should make a call here. Who are your top 2 running backs? Who are the guys you're going to roll with? Maybe they don't know yet, and that's fine. I think they probably do know, and I think it's probably Bucky Irving and Sean Tucker, but for whatever reason, they still like to roll with Rachaad White here. But for Sean Tucker, you're just hoping he can kind of pull away in this backfield. We'll see what he does tonight in a tough matchup against the Ravens. Then we have Tyler Goodson here, rostered in 9% of leagues. This is just someone who could be playable if JT continues to miss time. He out-carried Trey Sermon 14-8 in the Week 7 game. each took a goal line snap, but Goodson was the guy who ended up getting into the end zone. His receiving usage was not there like it was in week 6 or week 5 or no, week 6. But that definitely could have been due to, Richardson at quarterback, not going to have the same receiving volume as you had with Joe Flacco. But it does look like he's the better play if Jonathan Taylor ends up missing another week. Now we have some wide receivers here. Dontayvion Wicks rostered in 19.2% of leagues, had a 46% route participation, which is definitely not playable, but he continues to command targets at a very high level. 6 targets on 17 routes, went 3 for 48 and a touchdown. Heading into this game, he was 6th in target rate at the wide receiver position. That should go up here after week 7. So he's still kind of in like this handcuff wide receiver role where he's going to need an injury to a Jaden Reed, a Romeo Doubs, a Christian Watson to really like enter starting wide receiver territory for fantasy. But when he gets the opportunities, he's getting the volume. So kind of interesting because handcuff wide receivers typically don't exist. But Dontayvion Wicks is kind of the exception here. Then we have Jalen Tolbert, rostered in 29.6% of leagues on a bye week this week, but has been the Cowboys wide receiver 2 with Brandon Cooks out. He's put up 13 plus PPR points in 3 of his last 5 games. Definitely could be, considered as like a desperate play with bye weeks, injuries, all of that stuff. And then the final guy here, interesting option at the tight end spot, Jonnu Smith, rostered in 1.7% of leagues, and he's kind of emerged as like a big piece of this offense over the past couple of weeks. In week 7, he was targeted 7 times, caught all 7 of those for 96 yards and a touchdown. He actually led the team in targets, and the next highest was all the way down at 3, so more than doubled the number 2 target earner here for the Dolphins. In the previous game, week 6, he was targeted 8 times, caught 5 of them for 62 yards. Now, who knows what the usage is going to look like with Tua back? Obviously, you'd assume Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, going to take huge steps forward, see way more volume. But Jonnu Smith, he's been productive on an offense that hasn't been good. Obviously, we know the tight end position is kind of rough. If you're really struggling, I think he's worth a pickup. You take a look at, what his usage looks like if Tua is back in week 8, and then you kind of figure it out from there. But that's going to wrap it up for my top waiver wire targets this week. If you guys enjoy, hit that like button, subscribe. Thank you all for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.